Would you believe I take 14 pills a day?
I don't.
Yeah.
Well, if you were
oh,
a
you don't
caveman,
believe
what would
me?
happen?
How dare you?
I don't believe. No. I can't believe it. I literally can't fathom it.
I feel like there's two types of people. People in the modern era, people who take no medication, and then people who slowly increase their medication into their 40s to the point where they're like, wait, I take 15 pills a day. This is insane.
I know that pills are a necessary part of life to extend life.
There was a time where there were no pills.
But there's a time, and I guess, so I'm not, my question is, if you were like a caveman, would you just be like not live long? Like you'd be a psychotic caveman, or like, have you thought about that?
I have thought about it. Another thing I heard, I don't know if it's apocryphal or what, but is that the life expectancy, the idea that Renaissance people barely lived into their 30s and cavemen probably only lived in their 20s is kind of bullshit, because they mean the average life expectancy. So it's
Right.
If you lived pretty long. It's just that so many people died in infancy that it draws the average down.
I like the motherfuckers on the high end who are living out to 80 years in the Renaissance.
Renaissance,
soaking up all the life force,
getting gout,
the population,
from goose liver pate and shit,
staring at babies and like, you must die for me to
for
live
me
longer.
to live. Renaissance vampire. Well, I only bring it up because I think everyone in this movie needs lots of medication, especially
That's
the kids.
fairly true.
Let's drug these kids up.
That's true. This is Anderson's I'm Abe Epperson.
I'm Michael Swaim.
We are talking today about 2012's Moonrise Kingdom.
Yeah, let's get
in
into
our continuing effort to talk all things Anderson. The show talks about Paul Thomas Anderson for an episode and then switches to Wes Anderson. This is a Wes, and it's a story about two 12-year-old Holden Caulfields, I guess, as you alluded to, falling in love in a Norman Rockwell painting.
Yeah.
And then a small island of adults performs a search to try to get them back and out of each other's arms, you know?
I would say Norman Rockwell paintings have more depth and dimension than this does. I don't mean metaphorically. I mean the way it's shot. It is flat like a painting.
That's
intentionally.
True. Yeah. There's two different styles.
It's not a dig because it's clearly what he wanted to do. But yeah, it's a tough. The Master is a tough act to follow. Last time we did The Master. Ooh. Masterpiece, perhaps.
Perhaps.
But okay, let's dig into Moonrise. We start as we usually do with the first of our three spectra. Damn, I was gone for a month on my honeymoon and I forget everything. Diegesis. That's
Diegesis.
the one. I wanted to say pedagogy, but that's next. Which is where we just run you through the events with a little running commentary thrown in, as we do, to keep it from just being a dry Wikipedia read. But in our own words, what happens in the movie, what makes up the fabric of the film. I'll start because I'm talking. That cool? All right, much like Steve Zissou and The Sub, it starts with what in the land of theater is called dollhouse filmmaking.
That's correct.
Where the camera sort of dolly tracks up and down and left and right and gives us very flat, as I said, very geometric views of a home. And this time guess what? It's white people. Surprise. But it's like a classic Maine northeastern. Turns out it's on an island called New Penzance, which I think is a made up island, but it's, lighthouses and rainy weather and crochet on the walls and lobster traps and shit like that. It's this kind of milieu. We see that there's a bunch of kids. I didn't remember all the kids because they have like 5 kids. There's only one that matters. That's Susie. And the rest are just kind of blended in. One's Lionel. I remember that. But this is the Bishop family. We learn about Susie Bishop, who's the one that we end up focusing on in the scene. She's looking out through the rain with binoculars in a classic Wes Anderson sort of foible or unique character. Like, what's that? Guess what? She has dark eyeshadow. Surprise. She reminded me of Margot from Tenenbaums.
Yeah, she's
just younger.
Absolutely a younger version of Margot from Royal Tenenbaums.
Then we cut to Bob Balaban, just one of my favorite guys when he pops up. I love him. He's great in A Mighty Wind. He's great in so many things. Primarily a film producer, but people started realizing that he's just like likable to have in stuff. So he plays a narrator and he talks directly at camera, Deadpool style, and sets up the main climax plot point, which is that there's a big storm coming in 3 days. But we don't really focus on that for the bulk of the movie because it's 3 days away, and this movie covers those 3 days. So it's going to come in a while. Forget about it for now. We swap over to Camp Ivanhoe, which is where the khaki scouts are camped out. They're basically the Boy Scouts. Bingo, bango. You understand everything about them now.
Yeah.
They're led by, what's his name? Wade?
Edward Norton.
Yeah, it's Ed Norton. But anyway, I'll remember it later. He's Scoutmaster Wade? Something with a W.
Scoutmaster Ward.
Ward. Thank you. Ward. I wonder if that's a nod to the fact that Sam is a ward of the state. Maybe not. And he's basically what I would call a mixed bag scoutmaster, but also this is set in the 60s, so it's more acceptable. Like, he smokes a cigarette. He seems supportive of the kids, but also he sees a kid burning ants, and all he calls him out on is that his uniform is not straight, but he's fine with him burning ants with gasoline. And then he approves a bunch of fireworks. So like he's fine with the kids playing with fireworks, but he's really concerned that they're like doing it the right way and that they're prepped for it. They quickly realize Sam, the aforementioned Sam Shakusky, a weird misfit Holden Caulfield kid that no one likes, is missing at breakfast. They investigate his tent and find that he left a resignation note saying that he's quitting the khaki scouts and running away. Yeah.
Of course he does.
Well, to even top that in terms of wackiness, he's done a Shawshank Redemption on the tent.
I saw he cut a little hole and escaped through a poster.
Yeah.
Which is, that's cute. That's a cute little twee moment.
Oh, we busted out the twee word within 10 minutes.
if only Shawshank hadn't done it, that would be a legitimately cute thing.
That would be really funny if Shawshank hadn't done it, but I do think that affects it. Yeah.
I would have been like, go twee go, but now I'm just like, this is just more referential shit.
It's a nod. Yeah. You want to take the baton since you're talking?
Yeah. So we cut to kind of Bruce Willis, who's the chief of police of the island. He's Captain Sharp. And he informs the family of Sam that he's like, hey, your kid's missing. But turns out it's not actually his biological parents who are dead. It's his foster parents. And they just end up disowning him. They straight up say, he's emotionally disturbed. We're not going to welcome him back. So now Bruce Willis is confronted with the situation. Is like, well, what the hell am I supposed to do? Obviously, he's got to find this kid, but at the end of that, we have this looming kind of interpretation of the events that he is going to leave the scouts and be put into some kind of home, which is, they kind of follow up that later in Act 2. Mm-hmm. So we kind of blast into the scouts looking for him. It's very Army-esque. It's all very charming. They give a sock to a dog to hunt his scent. They gather weapons as if they're going to be needed and use their orienteering skills to try to find the kid. Meanwhile, Bruce Willis does his more kind of official, but equally cute search. He runs into Bill Murray and Frances McDormand, who are the aforementioned Susie's parents. And turns out, while being pen pals, Susie and Sam over the last year or so, who are fairly mature for their age, they've fallen in love and have determined to escape their respective prisons to hike, camp, and fish in the wilderness as they travel to, at this point, just a secret location. And we get a flashback to Sam's experience in camp. We find that he's introverted and intelligent, dislikes church, and in one instance, he steals away to a girls' changing room. After leaving the chapel, they're preparing for a play, which we just assume is another one of the camp's events. And he zeroes in immediately on Susie, who's dressed like a raven in the camp play, I assume.
Which is a Noah's Ark play, so all the kids are animals.
All the kids are animals, and she's got gauze over her hand, and he asks her about it, and she punched a mirror because she was angry at herself, which is cute and also terrifying.
Emotionally disturbed. Yeah. Also, just a little blink and you miss a detail that I do think is important for later. We see Susie watch Captain Sharp out the window share a cigarette with her mom, Frances McDormand, and we get the impression they're having an affair. So that's established.
Yeah, I do like how he does that. He kind of introduces their affair as stealing away moments. It's like just a conversation here, a name call here or something like that. Until it's full blown. Yeah, this is obvious what's happening. He kind of
like mother, like daughter. Yeah.
Yeah. But in any case, Susie and Sam, they kind of introduce themselves and it's like they're meet cute, and we assume from here on in, because we're reading this through letters, that this is the beginning of the relationship. And then from that, it's blossomed into something more romantic. So back in the present, he's brought her flowers. She brought a basket with a cat in it. It's all very cute. And they travel the woods together, crossing streams, foraging for food in search of, again, this predisclosed location.
Yeah. He tries to impress her with hot dogs and leaves on his head, scout stuff.
And Susie shares her interests, like her favorite album, some books that she stole from the library, while Sam takes inventory of their valuables and cat food. And our little mumblecore idiots find like a conflict immediately. She shows him one of her books. She reveals a book that she found called, I believe, Dealing with a Troubled Child, which was she found at her home and is one of her parents' book, which means that her parents think that of her. And he laughs at this. He goes, "That's funny," because he's dark and sardonic.
Apparently based on something that happened to Wes Anderson as a kid, by the way.
Correct. Yeah. And she basically chastises him for that. Like, don't laugh at me. And he immediately apologizes, and I thought this was cute. He just reminds her that he's on her side. He's like, "I'm on your side. Remember that."
Yeah, I highlighted that too. It's just so simple. It's misfits immediately accepting each other and working out their shit immediately, which is cute.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. It's okay. I'm on your side. I know. And then it's done.
And so we see the conflict resolution doesn't need much because things return to normal fairly soon. So they have some form of emotional kind of maturity in that respect. Back at the Bishop's, Susie's home, Murray and McDormand realize that their daughter's gone after, like
a day and a half or whatever. Yeah, 8 hours, more like 8 hours.
And Bruce Willis kind of arrives and he finds out, I got 2 kids to find. And I love the McDormand now is like, no, my kid is more important. That supersedes the search for the other kid. Also, we get the second drop of there may be something between Willis and McDormand because Murray gets mad when he uses her first name while they're searching in the car. So it's like, oh, I believe her name is Laura.
How's Laura handling it? Laura.
And and he's like, why are you calling my wife by her first name? Which is all very archaic and such. But I think the assumption is Murray is so aloof that he's like, you don't know her, which if he had been searching for, a little bit, he could realize that they have some kind of relationship, even if it isn't an affair at this point. And they find the 2 pen pals' letters, and in them are like watercolors that Sam's made, including nudes. So we get that it's kind of romantically escalated.
Yeah, Murray says, "Dear Christ, what am I looking at? Did she sit for this?"
Yeah, exactly. Because that's a legitimate question.
Legit question. Did he paint it from life? Was she nude in front of him?
Yeah. And we get another montage of their friendship growing, including one of the only shots that reveals Sam's home life, which apparently is just Greece. Like the foster kids that he lives with in the home are all Fonzies. Yeah. And I just love that detail because they're there only twice in the film. They're like there in 2 scenes. So it's like Wes Anderson saying, might as well make them all Fonzies. And they bond over their shared inability to connect with others. And through their letters, they lash out emotionally and they kind of confide to each other. And that's kind of bound them to what they consider these oppressive kind of home lives. If you want to take it from here.
So they get caught relatively easily. I think because they're hanging out, camping, being romantic rather than like booking it. So the khaki scouts catch up. One is on a motorcycle or like a children's-sized motorcycle, and they all brandish weapons and call him a fugitive. So it's obviously not a search party. One of them says to Susie, "You shouldn't be friends with him. He's emotionally disturbed because his family died." And it's like a Mexican standoff. Things are really tense. Finally, all hell breaks loose. The bike charges them. Sam shoots with his air rifle. There's a brief flashing shot of a bow and arrow flying through the air and scissors. And we don't know what it all means. It's very like non-diegetic. And then we just hear kids screaming. And in retrospect, what happened. Well, I like that Susie says, Molly's right, I do go berserk. Susie stabbed one of the kids in the kidneys with her left-handed scissors. One of the kids shot a bow and arrow, which unfortunately hit the dog Snoopy in the neck and killed the dog. And Sam shot a kid in both arms with the BB gun. So a lot of carnage, a lot of kids hurt.
I also love the motorcycle just hanging upon the tree in a cliff that was not a part of the geography of the original scene. So whatever event happened probably
threw the motorcycle.
Carried them,
you
know, like at least 100 meters.
Yeah.
The adults kind of start infighting and blaming each other.
They want to take the kids to the infirmary, of course, which is off the island. So they have to get a boat. So they're at the docks. And Murray, I think, is the only time in the movie someone screams, because it's a very subdued movie. Why can't you control your scouts? And then throws a shoe at him. Very similar to the belt in Darjeeling Limited. They fall to fighting. The Francis and Murray are both lawyers, so they threaten to sue repeatedly. And then finally, the narrator, Bob Balaban, who it turns out is a cartographer, steps in and basically just hands them on a silver platter like what they need to do next. He says they plan to retrace the Chickasaw harvest migration, which is the natives who lived on the island before it was colonized. I guess their path that they took in harvest season. So we cut to them by a sign that says this is the end point of the Chickasaw harvest migration track. And it's a little cove. It's a little beautiful beach, sort of sheltered. I think it's too cold to swim. No, do we see them swim? I guess they do. Seems too cold to me, but it's like a frigid, almost like the lighthouse in color. It's kind of a rocky beach.
And unfortunate for them, it's not the beach that makes you old.
That's right. No, they jump into the water.
Mile 3.25 Tidal Inlet.
Tidal Inlet. That's its official name. They do jump in. They jump in the water. That's right. Because then they're hanging out in their underwear. They do more romantic muddling about, basically. She reads to him. He pierces her ears with fish hooks to make little beetle earrings. They chat about their interests. Why do you always use binoculars? They help me see things. This is okay. I'll save it for later. Never mind. They talk. He warns her that he might wet the bed later, which is also a hallmark of a child who's had a lot of trauma in their life, if you didn't know. Shows off a pin his dead mom gave him. They play more French records and dance like spazzes, which was a scene that they shot at the end because they wanted the kids to be comfortable dancing like spazzes in front of each other. They kiss. He spits. She asks if they can French kiss. They hug. She says his wiener is hard. And he says, do you mind? And she says, I like it. He says, tilt your head sideways. They French even more. You can touch my chest. So like they're pushing it for 12-year-olds. They're getting into it. As one of the kids in the treehouse will later say, I hear he got to third base. Nah, he just felt her up. I don't know how they know that. Who saw? Like, how could they possibly know? But
it's just kids making shit up. You know, they just happen to be right. I think
they're right. Yeah. Anyway, the next morning, so they sleep in the tent. And of course, this was always doomed. They're on a fucking island. So the next morning they hear airplanes and boats, and they open the tent flap, and everyone is perfectly arrayed on the beach staring at them, like every character so far. Bill Murray charges straight at camera and lifts the tent off of them, which was, I gotta say, my one big laugh in this movie. Similar to how in Rushmore, my one big laugh was Bill Murray reaching back and hitting his kids in the car.
Yeah, he's like a giant who's just opening up a house.
Yeah, he just lifts the tent fully off them. Ward informs Sam that his foster parents called and said he's unadopted, which is obviously, we're piling bad news on bad news here. Susie gets taken back to the boat in proverbial shackles. The dad says they'll never speak again. You'll never see that boy again. Meanwhile, Ward was mad at Sam, but now he feels bad that he's an orphan. So he's sort of consoling him and feels guilty and is trying to be his buddy now. He says, I wish we had time to do an inspection back on the beach. That was one of the best pitched campsites I've ever seen. And it's like genuinely sad that he's quitting khaki stouts because he thinks he's a good scout. Obviously, he survived in the woods and made traps and shit.
I thought he was talking about his boner.
Oh, best pitched tent? Yeah.
Yeah.
Always. I mean, he's a Boy Scout troop leader. He's probably talking about the kids' boners, let's be honest.
Zing.
statistically speaking.
Zing.
Sharp, Captain Sharp gets a call from Tilda Swinton in the movie, whose name appears to be social services. She refers to herself by name as social services. Like
as the social services.
Yeah, later she'll say, this is like the most backwards thing I've ever seen in my 27 years as a social services. So she's cold and calculating. She represents the machine. She just explains with a smile, with a shark tooth smile, that she'll be collecting Sam and he'll be going to an orphanage. Or since there was a stabbing involved, he might be institutionalized or he might get shock treatment. She says, our report indicates a stabbing with scissors. And they both yell, that was the girl that did that. But the point is, she's the big bad now, right? We don't want her to come and take Sam. His life will be a sad one if she gets her druthers. Murray is shattered. It's never revealed whether he knows she's having an affair. But he's fallen into a deep Lost in Translation style depression. He walks by shirtless with an axe in one hand and a bottle of booze in the other and says he's going to go find a tree to chop down. Susie's back home. Frances bathes her and they have a really fucking teen mom conversation where Susie says, I hate you and I want to hurt you. And she reveals she knows about the affair. I know what you do with that sad, dumb policeman. Frances basically does the cowardly thing and says, we're never going to talk about that again. She realizes that Susie took the troubled child book and tries to tell her that we don't think you're troubled, you're just emotional. But she persists in saying, we're in love. What's wrong with being in love? We're in love. Meanwhile, Sam is staying with Captain Sharp because it'll take a day for social services to get there. And they have their cute, like that was what women are like, so to speak. Yeah. And here's what dudes be like, which is he gives him beer and he cooks him like a sausage and a piece of bread in his bachelor's trailer. And he tries, Sam professes that they're in love and they try to talk through it in their own way. I liked the line, you're probably a more intelligent person than I am, to Sam. So Willis is admitting he's dumb. But even a smart kid sticks their finger in the electrical socket from time to time, and it's our job to see that they don't hurt themselves too much. He accuses the kid accuses him of being a bachelor, and he goes, so are you. So are you.
So are you.
Were you in love? What happened? She didn't love me back. So kind of a neat scene between them. They bond. This will come into play later. And then we cut to all the mean kids, the kids like Lazy Eye and Boy Scouts. They're hanging out in their treehouse playing poker or whatever. And one kid in a full like smoking robe decides it's too much. He decides the time has come to mend their ways. And he stamps his foot and says, damn us, we've been a bunch of mean jerks, and tells them, it's almost like Lisa Simpson in the dental plan episode. Like, you, Lazy Eye, if he didn't help you with your thing, you never would have done that. Don't you feel bad doing blah, blah, blah. And he riles them up and they all go, okay, we're completely flipping our character motivations now. We're going to help them. Frances sneaks out to cheat or to see Captain Sharp. The khaki scouts take advantage of this opportunity to sneak in and try and spring Susie and Sam. Frances and Willis share a last cigarette as Captain Sharp ends their relationship very concretely. It's pretty clear that she doesn't want it to end. She says, like, who knows what could happen? I'll see you tomorrow. And he says, no, you're doing the right thing. It's over. It's over. So getting his moral high ground back, which again leads to the ending. The scouts make paper mache dummies and then they break Sam out via the chimney or whatever. It doesn't matter. They bust him out. They all get into miniature canoes and sail across the lake to see one of the kids' big cousin, Ben, ably played by Jason Schwartzman, who's an older scout. And it turns out there's a camp of not adult, but like tween scouts with mustaches across the lake. And they figure he can tell them what to do next, or like how to smuggle the kids off the island. Balaban reminds us that the storm is just about to come now, like it's starting to happen. Meanwhile, in bed, Frances apologizes to Walt, the husband, but he says, what are you apologizing for specifically? And she says, whatever injuries still hurt. So she's not admitting to the affair, but maybe he suspects. It's not actually fully clear. But he does say, I hope the roof flies off and I get sucked up into space, which is pretty depressed. And also a line that Fall Out Boy stole to use in a song.
That's
that
cute.
line was
Good
used
for
in a Fall Out Boy
Boy.
song. Yeah, good for them.
Good job, Fall Out Boy.
Yeah. And I think a pretty poignant line about parenting. We're all they've got, Walt. That's not enough. Like, that is depressing, dude. So he thinks they're not fit to raise their kids. But we drop that. You want to take it from the Harvey Keitel introduction?
Yeah, so basically something that the old mean scouts who are now nice scouts, they're planning to seek out Jason Schwartzman, aka Cousin Ben, who works under Harvey Keitel on the other island with the other Boy Scout that has more resources, including access to boats. So they're hopeful that they can just get off the island if they like steal on a boat. And Ben, we get an introduction that's very much like the introduction with Ed Norton, where it's all lateral panning as we, kind of reveal the camp. And it's just a bustle of activity and scouts doing activities in the background, like zip lines and whatnot. And Ben decides to try to make Sam and Susie. Specifically, Sam is going to go to a crabbing boat anchored off the island.
Claw cracker.
And be a claw cracker. So, like, he's going to live hard life, as if this is possible, so that Sam can work as a crewman and avoid social services. It's brought up at one point or another that Sam and Susie want to get married before they kind of have to part. And for no reason, well, I guess for nickels, Cousin Ben performs a wedding ceremony where he claims it's not legally binding in any way, and it's just in their hearts. And so they have that, and there's a disagreement about what should be done with the nickels that are being paid, and if they should be given back to them as they start their new life.
Yeah.
So they decide in the end, Cousin Ben decides to give him the nickels, and they leave on a sailboat, which is surprisingly fast, like a motorboat.
Yeah, okay. I'm glad we.
And Sam and Susie and Ben set off for the crabbing boat, and quickly returns because Sam has to go back to camp because Susie has left her binoculars, which she claims is her superpower. So Sam has to go back and infiltrate camp. And as Sam returns to the camp chapel to look for his binoculars, he's confronted by Redford, who is the lead bully who got stabbed by Susie in the kidneys, who's like the big bad, so to speak. He's the kid on the motorcycle.
He hates them still. He's not good. Yeah.
Nah, he alerts the camp that Sam and Susie are here, and a chase kind of occurs, including Sam getting hit by lightning, but he's fine. In fact, he just wipes off his glasses and we
says,
keep going.
I'm okay. Yeah.
Yeah. And Edward Norton is kind of on the chase as well, because he's kind of stole off on a boat on his own because he feels the obligation to find these kids. He felt like he lost these kids. And as he arrives at camp, Edward Norton is chastised by Harvey Keitel, who takes his badge and his knife.
Where's your goddamn troop, you son of a bitch? You don't have them? I'm field stripping you of your command.
Right. And in the last few scenes, we've slowly gotten increasingly more lightning strikes, and then a flash flood occurs. And as it's built up over the last few scenes, it breaks a dam, and the flash flood takes out Fort Lebanon, the fancy Boy Scout troop. And it kind of storms the whole area, including where Harvey Keitel went back to his tent, and the fireworks go off, and that injures Harvey Keitel. And Edward Norton kind of heroically saves him, which I'm sure is to a great, glee to him because he's felt useless so far.
Right.
And that's kind of the one thing. There was an earlier line that I wanted to bring up, which is that when he's asked about what his vocation is, in kind of a reference to Saving Private Ryan, where they ask Tom Hanks, hey, what do you do? And Edward Norton says, I'm a math teacher. And then he comes back and he says, no, actually, I'm a Boy Scout leader. I'm a math teacher on the side. So he really takes this seriously, or at least thinks he does. And this is kind of his moment to shine. And he leads the troops, as in the whole Harvey Keitel's troops.
The combined
and
troops.
some of his straggling, troops that he's got to safety. Meanwhile, Susie's parents, Bruce Willis, Tilda Swinton, Edward Norton, basically all the Boy Scouts from the camp try to pursue. And once again, we're in this pattern where we're searching for them. And they all kind of seek shelter because everything has kind of gone tits up from the rain. So they all have to seek shelter in the church. And Sam and Susie also are there with some of their Boy Scouts. It's also the church where Sam and Susie first met, or at least Sam ditched and went into the back rooms of to meet Susie. And so he's hiding in the steeple, and they're dressed in the fox costumes and the paper mache masks. And Bruce Willis kind of finds them, and he apprehends them. But as they're up at top of the roof, lightning destroys the steeple. But Willis kind of grabs them before they fall. And he's like, do not drop them, or do not let go, he says. And we get the sense that, it's over now.
And where the fuck are they going to go?
Where are they going to go? So after or I guess it's during the storm, there's some back and forth about whether or not what Sam's future is going to be. And it kind of comes up to Willis that it's a possibility that he can become Sam's legal guardian, which he does after the storm. The hurricane kind of races. Oh, by the way, Moonrise Kingdom, the reason for the title, that's what they rename the beach that doesn't make you old, from the map.
Is that what you call any beach now in your life?
Yes.
The beach that doesn't make you old? Yeah.
Yeah, because it gives me a great sense.
A feeling of
sadness.
youthfulness. Oh, okay.
Yeah. At Summer's End, which is, I believe, the home. Because
it's the name of the Bishop home. It has a name.
It has a name.
You got to name your house.
Yeah. So we get this scene where Sam is upstairs and he's in he's a deputized policeman, I guess, of the island. He has been taken in as Bruce Willis's ward now. And Sam is upstairs painting a landscape of Moonrise Kingdom. Susie and his brothers are called to dinner. Sam slips out of the window to join Bruce Willis in his patrol car. We get the sense that it's an awkward kind of assembly of people, but it works. And he tells Susie that he will see her the following day. And that's the end of the movie.
Clarissa Explains It All style, if anyone remembers the boyfriend who because it's a good switch. You're like, oh, they're allowed to see each other now. Nope. Bruce Willis is just okay with him bending the rules for love. Because of course he has an affair in his past and he gets it. And I think important to note that until Bruce Willis says, I can be your dad, they were about to kill themselves. They were going to jump into the storm flood, and Susie makes the point that it's probably so shallow that they'll die. And they're like, okay. So it could have been much, much grimmer. Fortunately not. Social services lady kills herself. I'm amazed. I'm amazed she made it to the island in the storm. They never really cover how she got there.
Yeah, well, I mean, the storm started while they were in transit, so they had to land there. That's
Gotcha.
The idea is just all the events have to happen for the story to happen, like a Jurassic Park.
It's a clockwork little thing. Yeah. So much like clockwork, let's perfectly organize our show into a set of spectra and get into the second layer of those, which we do call pedagogy, the aforementioned pedagogy. And this is where we dig in and we get to say what we want, point out things about the movie that struck us. It's the meat of the podcast. So I'd love to start with how it's shot, because I have not a ton to say about that. And I thought I assume you might have something to say about it. For me, it's like Steve Zissou meets Darjeeling Limited, because Darjeeling Limited was the first Wes movie where I noticed multiple times the really loud choice of, I call it the That 70s Show shot, where a camera is pointed in one direction, then it turns 90 degrees, then it turns 90 degrees, then it turns 90 degrees, which is a very unique shot. You don't see it in many films at all. That 70s Shows moves continuously in a circle. Wes's goes like boop, boop, boop. And it's a cool way. It's a unique, loud way to show off a space. And it really suits itself to highly organized blocking, like highly choreographed blocking. Like the camera turns and Susie immediately appears from the stairwell. Like that obviously took some doing. It almost reads like comic panels. And very similarly, he's also using even more. I feel like Steve Zissou is where he first used the dollhouse filmmaking thing, when we go through the sub. And he
Yes.
uses that throughout this all the time. And then I got to say, the last one we covered was Fantastic Mr. Fox, which was a cartoon, stop motion. This feels like the first movie of Wes's, and he'll do this again later, that is a live action cartoon. Like, it's stilted to a degree that feels intentional, but to me felt like a cartoon, like it's trying to be a Looney Tune almost. I mean, for God's sake, someone gets struck by lightning and they have soot all over their face and their hair is sticking out. Like, how is, that's cartoon shit. And for better or worse, that's just how it struck me, is it's kind of shot like a cartoon.
Yeah, I'd say absolutely right. I think the key is proscenium or diorama. Like you mentioned Dollhouse filmmaking, which includes a lot of lateral dolly, and you mentioned the 90-degree pans. Another indication of flat space is that we see a lot of this. It's not the first time he's ever done it. In fact, I actually think there's one in like Rushmore. There's definitely a few in Bottle Rocket even.
Yeah, I'm not encyclopedically correct. It's just my sense
there's
of it.
a 60s, 70s servo zooms, which are like these, basically just mechanical zoom. It's just a little motor that you can set the speed of. And it's, when you think of the shot in Django Unchained where it zooms in and Leonardo DiCaprio tips his drink, that meme, it's that kind of vibe. And it was used a lot by like Robert Altman and a lot of those directors.
Is it, correct me if I'm wrong, but
Sidney Pollack.
It's notable, like your eyes notice it because it's a zoom that is that's mechanically smooth, meaning
it's too smooth.
A
It's
human
not,
zooming wouldn't zoom that perfectly. It's like a perfect zoom.
Yeah. Modern zooms are a little bit more organic, I think, from the influence of documentary filmmaking and its heyday. And reality TV.
Think The Office, zooms in The Office.
But it's
very
also
different.
a particular speed. And the reason I mention these techniques is just because it's all about the elucidation of flat space. And I think that there's a reason for it in a lot of these movies about dysfunction. The reason that things all look like a diorama, there's a play in it. There's almost always a play in a Wes Anderson film, because it's not just like the pageantry and the sets and the style that go along with them, but it's everything is an archetype. They lack depth. They are just representative to whatever you are. Kind of like the Raven in the play doesn't represent anything other than who Susie is.
There's
not
5
as
birds and she's the black one. You get
right,
it.
Like
yeah.
It's not symbolism, right? It's just archetypal. She's the other. She's the odd one, the dark one. And Wes Anderson's goal is only to present a home for weirdos that is cozy and safe. And I think that actually is the lateral dollies, the flat space making, the proscenium theater kind of presentation actually, because of the lack of complexity, really works for this film. And you also mentioned that there's a lot of wides and a lot of kind of in-camera rhythm.
And a lot of wide profiles, like almost like a Mortal Kombat shot, where it's like 2 people facing each other. Which
is par for the course because it's all presented like a Wes Anderson film, but it's also a lot more space than he usually deals with. And I think that of all the live action Wes Anderson films, I feel he really nailed the in-camera rhythm the best in this one. Like anytime there's a static wide, he needed to introduce some aspect of movement in some other quadrant of the frame. Like if you remember the trampoline kid, when Susie and Sam...
That's a great visual bit. It really is.
Yeah, have their off-mic chat about getting married because, like, Cousin Ben, Jason Schwartzman, says, you should really go and talk about this. And so they do. And we don't hear their conversation, but we hear the loud bouncing of just this shitty kid jumping on a
what's great is
on the other side of frame.
It's anti-humor in the deadpan way that Wes Anderson often does. He goes, go over by that trampoline and discuss it. And then you cut to a postcard wide of them standing by a trampoline with a kid doing like crazy backflips on the trampoline, and you can't hear what they're talking about. So it's just like making a meal out of nothing.
Yeah, but it's also kind of a punchline to the static aspect of the scene, the way he chose to present that.
That's why I see the Fantastic Mr. Fox connection. It feels like he got used to that level of frame control, and now he wants it.
In fact, he uses it in the other instance on the other side of the spectrum, I would say, in terms of speed, with like the zip lines and the marches of the Boy Scouts when we're first introduced to Fort Lebanon. or even the speed and pace of Edward Norton in the original kind
walking
of,
through the camp.
yeah. The that kind of it adds not just a distraction, but it reminds me of like the famous like I think it's American Express card ad that he
The
did.
West
If you
did,
haven't seen
yeah.
it, where he's like, do that, and that's a choice. Yeah, I have to make fast choices, so I use American Express or whatever it is. But like the idea is that a lot of things are happening and it's too fast to kind of handle. He's playing with that more so than he ever has, and that's an element of control that is really kind of staggering. And I also wanted to bring up the last one, the sailboat leaving and coming back.
As if it's being pulled on a chain underwater, which it probably is.
Yeah. He gave the Boy Scouts on the right of frame some business to shuffle around in the silence of before they return, because he keeps it a continuous shot. And even in the silence or static moments, there's just small movement somewhere else in frame. And in its distraction, he just knows how that plays to comedic timing, because now he is introducing a meter upon it. He's taking out editing and he's replacing it with something else. He's replacing it with, this in-camera kind of rhythm. And that is also something you can utilize for the comedic timing. So he's really kind of doing that, and it's all kind of in this space that is flat and presentational, and that's all you need. And it's the first time that, even though it's no surprise to anyone who's been listening to this podcast, I'm not the biggest fan of Wes Anderson. In a archetypal story like this, where it's just like boy meets girl, boy and girl want to steal
love
away.
writ large, yeah.
And
Romeo
there's
and
not
Juliet.
really a dissection of who they are and what their actions, other than running away, do to the group. And there's no pushback from the family or not. They're just set in their sadness or set in their dysfunction or.
And it's not like Royal Tenenbaums. They don't process. They just say what they're going to do and then do it. Yeah.
It actually kind of works because, once again, it's not playing with symbolism. It's playing with archetypes. And I think that that's kind of, I'm not going to call it interesting, but it's suited. It fits.
It shows a lot of, that sailboat shot is the one that really impresses me, because it shows a lot of attention to detail and intentionality. You have to work hard. I think it's a chain underwater or something, but like, obviously to get that effect, you have to know that's going to work ahead of time. And that does take some vision to know that the sailboat should go really fast. Like, as soon as the sail is unfurled, it should zip at a constant rate off screen. I don't think a lot of people would think of that. And it does speak to a cohesive vision that Wes has. Muted colors throughout. Also the super tall treehouse that's like impossibly tall on a tree with no branches.
Right, that felt like Fantastic Mr. Fox.
That felt like a tip off that it's going to be a cartoony movie. And I also thought the score, because the score was very Looney Tunes. It's like plucky harp music, like dun 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 dun. Curious befuddled music, I call it.
Looney Tunes is absolutely right.
And he also cuts to, he'll do a lot of inserts. Basically, whenever he does inserts, they're never alone. So he'll like cut to a series of patches around Sam's uniform, or he'll cut to close-ups of various things in the tent, which I don't, it's like you're either very far or very close. And then there's those machine zooms once in a while, but used very sparingly, which makes them feel special.
Because that's also like, here, look at this element of this character.
Mm-hmm.
That's all you get. And then we move on. Identity is baked in this movie. There's not like most teenage stories or typical teenage stories, there's a search for who they are, right? Because it's a very formative age. In this movie, they're very confident in who they are. A lot of Wes Anderson characters are.
They wear the same clothes throughout the whole movie, the same outfits. It's like, this is my little uniform.
That identity being baked in, to me, is another thing that elucidates kind of just that surface level. It's not shallow because he actually makes a meal out of it. It's choosing to be a cartoon.
The other shot I noticed that I don't know if it means anything. I think it's just an affect or a cool shot. I noticed it because it's Raimi-esque to me. There are multiple shots in this where he perched the camera like on the prow of a boat, on the front of a plane, When the
aerial
kid
shot.
charges on the motorcycle, the camera's strapped to the front of the motorcycle, almost like a GoPro.
Mhm.
I don't know. They were just notable shots that I don't think he's really done before, or I don't recall.
Yeah. And yeah, so I think there's a lot of good craftsmanship that kind
Yeah.
of's about the world building, which is always what Wes Anderson is doing. I kind of want to talk about what he's trying to say or what he's trying to fuck with, right?
Yeah. I'll let you lead that conversation, but this is just where I'll drop. I don't like this movie that much. And so I'm glad we talked about how his directing is competent. And another thing I'll point out is the child acting is quite good. And it's pretty ballsy to make your two emotional leads carrying the most weight kids. I don't think he's done that before. Schwartzman was kind of young in Rushmore, but not that young. And I don't think it's possible to have great child acting without a thoughtful director. So he's directing the film well. I just have very different tastes than him. And the one thing I want to point out, and then I'll hand it over to the illustrious Dr. Movies, is it's the script. It's what he's saying I don't care about. Why do you always use binoculars? They help me see things closer, even if they're not very far away. I pretend it's my superpower. That sounds like poetry. Poems don't always need to rhyme, they just need to be creative. To me, this is the exact moment that he became a parody of himself. Like, that is like a parody of Twee. It's such a bullshit sequence of lines.
That's so fucking crazy, dude. Like, same brain. Because, like, I literally wrote down and I deleted it because I was like, I don't need to make this podcast about how much, like, what I think about Wes Anderson. But just because you mentioned it, I literally said it's like it's like going to a literature class and reading a great poem and being obsessed with the rhymes.
Right.
And not like the content necessarily. I'm not saying he avoids the content and he's missing it. But it's just like you're focusing on this really fun aspect of the poem, but it's like not why we're like like for me. And it's just different folks, different strokes. But it's just crazy to me that you thought of the rhyming aspect, just because that is absolutely it's the stylistic over the substance, and teach their own. I'm sure there's many people who disagree, especially dysfunctional people feel this speaks to them, because I really do feel like it's being made for them.
It's funny because in the same scene, I think there's a sequence of lines that are very resonant about that. When Sam says, I feel like I'm in a real family, not like yours, but similar, talking about his foster parents, which is, of course, bitterly ironic. And she says, which I totally get. I felt this as a kid. I always wished I was an orphan because most of my favorite characters are. It kind of makes you special. And he says, I love you, but you don't know what you're talking about. Which
and I like her response,
was a trailer
which is,
line.
I love you too.
She's focusing on I got the I love you. They choose to see what they want to see,
which is kind of, I think, very important to what this movie and the story is about. And just because we focused on kind of the peripheral kind of artifacts of what this movie is, we haven't really talked about, and just to prove we understand the movie. This movie really is about dissecting roles, right? And there's a reason I think that they're Boy Scout troops. He likes navies, he likes armies, he likes families with a patriarch, and then he likes to deconstruct them and show how dysfunctional most of them actually are,
even
to the point of absurdity.
Institutions.
And I think that this movie is the same, and it's actually kind of doing a microcosm or a diorama of, and that's why it's on an island, of like a basic society and child rearing. And it has a little bit to do with gender roles, and it has a lot to do about how kids and adults treat each other. One thing I want to point out is that, like, when Sam and Susie actually finally meet and we get that montage of them kind of traversing the landscape, he immediately is the provider. During their initial hike montage, he just runs the show. He's constantly asking her if she's thirsty, and helps her across streams by devising these contraptions that are fairly unnecessary, but shows that he's pretty good at it. And then, so we have this idea of these teenagers like kind of fulfilling these roles that they feel like they're supposed to, and juxtapose that with what's happening in the adult world. At one point, Bruce Willis talks about grief, and he talks about his divorce, and he's kind of And this, I think it's kind of one of the resonant lines of this screenplay, which is he's also talking about Sam's parents. And he says, I'm sorry for your loss. At least that's what you're supposed to say. Yeah. And I think Wes Anderson's trying to pick apart this kind of existential problem with the order and behavior of society, that those that don't fit or feel that they want to fit elsewhere must correct, and individuality will be like kind of suffocated or suffer because of that. And therefore, there's this focus on the failure of functioning in society. The marriages don't work. Children can easily escape their families. Literally, the infrastructure can be wiped out by a flood.
And the parents think the parents think the kids don't know they're dirt, but they do. Like they see through it.
Exactly. And it's there is an element of this that is like the proscenium theater is all very shallow. And that's not a discredit to Wes Anderson and the storytelling. I think that's supposed to happen. Whereas in other films like Royal Tenenbaums, I don't think it's as pronounced in the movie. This movie, it's very pronounced. It's supposed to say the shallowness is the problem. And I think your lives are more special. I love you, but you don't know what you're talking about. That line that you pointed out. Mm-hmm. I think that is Wes Anderson trying to make clear to his audience. I know that the shallowness that I kind of make these films and kind of the mumblecore aspect of no one really talking and everyone talking at each other is not real.
Well, and it's almost directed this one more than the previous ones. And this has become his thing. This is why Asteroid City really bothers me. He's started clearly directing people to, like, if you would if you would have 100% passion or emotion in another movie, dial it down to like 30% in this movie. Not just the screen is muted colors, but emotions are muted. The people act like paper dolls. Like other than Bill Murray for comedic effect, everyone speaks very calmly and plainly. And that's like his signature now from this point moving forward.
Yeah, I think so. And I think it's probably Bill Murray's influence too. I mean, he's been a divorced dad like 5 times at this point.
He's done mumblecore a lot. Yeah.
And he's done a lot of that kind of like sad sack, but also unable to kind of until he gives up a part of himself, he is unable to get past that threshold. We don't get that character in this because it's centered around the kids who already know who they're all about. And that kind of brings us to what I think the crux of the movie and crux of every Wes Anderson movie, I think, which is damage finds damage.
Misfits fall in love, right? Luke Wilson and Gwyneth Paltrow. Yeah.
Like the kind of new family or the new loved ones are a group of people who just decide to be on your side. And that is why things like the Scouts, apropos of nothing, have an off-screen realization that they're the baddies. And then they're like, yeah, we're gonna help you now. It feels unearned because frankly it is if you look at reality in the way that reality is. But if you look at the magical realism that is Wes Anderson's preferred kind of living space, you start to see that this is just how he computes the world, right? He's just saying, look, I don't know how exactly it works, but I know that this is what I prefer. And I think that there's a power in that. You know, I think that he's doing it for the weirdos. I happen to not be as much of I think that's in all of us, but I don't happen to identify with that. And that's fine. Does not need to be a movie for me. But it's just an interesting way in which to present what I would say is a very stereotypical teenage tale. It's got traces of Romeo and Juliet, definitely.
And there are moments where I think it captures the feeling of being 12 and having a big crush. Like it works on the love level from time to time. The kids are cute is basically what I'm saying. Like their love is cute. That works. I never noticed that he almost always has a play within his movies. That's a good point. I don't think he'll ever top the Rushmore Vietnam play, but one thing I loved about this, just as a conceptual joke, is that the play they're doing is The Flood and Noah's Ark, and it gets canceled due to the flood. They can't do the Noah's Ark play because of the flood. That's
he also
good.
Likes that repetition and shit. You know, he loves having someone. It's kind of it reminds me of like what, and I don't know who did it first, but it reminds me of Big Lebowski, where Lebowski finds these phrases that he hears earlier in the movie and just parrots them.
This aggression will not stand, man.
In order to seem smart or wise. And in the same way, it's there's a repeating kind of motifs and lines in this, but they're not often to pure wise, or it's not a joke. It's just, I know to do that. I want it to rhyme.
Yeah.
And
I thought that was invented by Tim the Toolman Taylor and his neighbor Wilson. Anyone?
Yeah. I think you're right about that.
They kind of own that
Wilson is the most wise of us all.
Yeah. That's why you can only see half his head.
He is the Shakespearean fool, the wise man.
He's the
Tiresias all in one.
I should know his name. Polonius. He's the Polonius, or
he's
Falstaff.
The Polonius, baby. Yeah. But so I think that's kind of what the movie's about, or that's what I gleaned from it, which can be an complete kind of rendition of it. But I will stand and say Moonrise Kingdom, which is a movie that I watched, is the last Wes Anderson movie that I watched in theaters. And I walked out of that one saying, I don't need to watch another Wes Anderson ever. That's
interesting. I walked out of theaters. I watched this in theaters too, thinking that was really cute. I really liked it. This time watching it with a critical eye, I was like, it's all right.
Yeah, I mean, because it's all right. Like he's doing. It's not that he's rehashing all the old hits. I mean, he is. That's kind of been his career, but that's fine. Pop music is the same thing. You don't need to reinvent yourself as an artist every fucking movie. I'm not saying this is a fault of his.
The rare artist that does do that, especially in music, our rare artist that reinvents himself every album, they become like legendary usually.
They're legendary.
It's something that really stands out.
That's why, history will remember their names.
Right.
It's like that thing in Troy is like, I wouldn't want to fight that guy. That's why no one will remember your name. Just bodying a kid.
Yeah.
Anyway. Yeah, it's like it's Wes Anderson doing really, really polished version of Wes Anderson. It's fantastic. And I think
I don't care for it.
I think that there's other movies where like the commentary, where like the stuff I was saying about aping roles and damage finding damage, that's present and more in other films like Rushmore and Royal Tenenbaums to me.
Yeah.
Because there is a pushback. Because there's a back and forth between Luke Wilson and Gwyneth Paltrow and Royal Tenenbaums where it's like, oh, I did this because you did this. Oh, you did this because I did this.
Yeah.
Where it's like you get a little bit more of a stew going because there's opposing forces that manipulate each other in a way by, directly or indirectly, in like they could be doing it on purpose or not. But like there is a kind of third thing that is formed and synthesis. And this movie doesn't really care about the synthesis. And I think that's fine. I think that Looney Tunes doesn't care about synthesis.
Right. No, one of the most resonant lines in this screenplay is, we're in love, we want to be together. What's wrong with that? That's about as simple as an idea as you can present in film form. If this is a cartoon, then Tenenbaums is a novel. Like, I heard the new one, Henry Sugar and Four More Wonderful Stories or whatever, is quite good. And I've heard good things about French Dispatch, and we'll get to them. I haven't seen that. But if this is, I don't know if he'll ever top Tenenbaums for me, because that one makes me feel sad and weird in an adult, mature way that I like.
Mm-hmm.
This one makes me go, that's cute.
Yeah, that's cute. But it's maybe because it's designed to kind of be for teenagers.
Yeah.
And, so we can just be old men.
I wonder if 12
sky.
to 15-year-olds who saw this were really, really impacted by the love plot. I wonder that.
Absolutely they were, man.
If you were that age,
being 14?
If you were the angsty teen having your first crush age when you saw this, please comment. I'd love to know how it hit you.
When children out there who are listening to this.
Well, this came out in 2012, dude. That's
true.
Forget
They're
that was 12 years ago.
Longer, but I remember when I was 14 and I was reading the shit out of Steinbeck. There's a reason I mentioned the Holden Caulfields of it. I thought he was so not cool. I just thought he spoke to me, like he was just a real artist.
The thing I remember about Steinbeck is it's almost like he was a sketch comedian, because almost all of his short stories end with someone getting shot in the head.
Yeah, it's kind of
the pearl
low-hanging fruit.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just the worlds are phonies. Yeah, dude. Yeah, dude.
Yeah, dude, everyone's a phony. The
Everyone
one thing
knows.
that got me is when the pimp hits him in the stomach. I did go like, that's so unfair.
That's so unfair.
The world's unfair to teenagers.
What did he do to deserve this? But in any case,
well, what he did was act like an asshole the entire book.
Well, he shouldn't be there doing those things, but that's we're not talking.
We're not here for that.
We're not talking Cannery Row or
no, what's it called?
Separate Piece.
Fuck. What's Holden Caulfield from? Catcher in the Rye. Thank you, Catcher in the Rye.
That literature does not appeal to me. It did at one point, but very shortly. Like I had a year where I basically went through all my like emotional puberty, and then I stopped, and then I never developed past.
Then I never had emotions again, as all adult men must.
That year, oh boy, I was.
What a year!
The year of live journal. I'll tell you that.
Yeah. Yeah.
An AOL Instant Messenger. Woo-wee. But in any case, shall we move on? Or
let's
do you
do
got
it.
more you want to talk about?
No, let's move on to How'd He Do That? Which is basically, we close it out with some trivia, behind the scenes information, anything about the making of that we found interesting. I'll start because I think it pairs really well with how I find the movie ultimately kind of boring. Wes Anderson named the dog Snoopy and set the movie in 1965 because that's the year A Charlie Brown Christmas came out. And it's, Rushmore and the Royal Tenenbaums also have Peanuts references, and Wes Anderson loves Peanuts. Okay, my mom loves Peanuts, and we had all the Peanuts books in our bathrooms growing up, and I've read almost all of Peanuts. Peanuts is so boring. Peanuts has no jokes in it. Peanuts sucks. So the fact that he thinks Peanuts is anti-comedy to me, and the fact that he loves Peanuts makes total sense. Well, that makes so much sense to me.
So you're just saying fuck Peanuts?
Yeah, I'll say fuck Peanuts. I don't think there's a huge contingent of Charlie Brown heads who are going to come at me either. I think Schultz is dead.
I don't know, man. You just awoke the sleeping mafia, man.
Look, I'm not, good grief. I'm not talking shit on Calvin and Hobbes. This is just Peanuts. It's just Peanuts.
It's just Peanuts, baby. Yeah, I mean, but that's just, it means it's not for you, right?
Yeah, Peanuts is insanely successful. Yeah.
This is a remake of a movie called Melody. Kind of.
Have you seen that? Because I have not.
Yeah,
and I wonder how close of a remake is it?
It's not that close. It's only about two teens. It all takes place in like a school and homes. Two teens basically fall in love, and they tell their parents, "We're going to get married, like as soon as you'll let us, and we're going to try to convince you." And they're like, "What?" Because it's 1971, and it was written by Alan Parker, who did like Evita and Midnight Express. It's similar, just in that the characters kind of have their own shared reality. In this movie, everyone shares that reality. That's why you see like everything feel like it's wrong or like the failure of adults, because if they live in that reality, that's basically a storybook as well. It's not that wrong. It's very easy to go, well, then they should just be together, right? Because the rules of this game, the rules of this world are that things are going to be fine for everybody. It's the 1971's Melody is a lot different than that, where it's like, it's going to be the end of the generation. Like, we can't let kids do this. Kids all falling in love and mimicking the radicalism of the 60s. We can't let this happen. And that's more of what that movie's about. But again, he just took the parts that he likes, which I think is something you say about good artists still. And it just happens to be that he just wanted to tell a story about, teens more mature than adults.
As Pink Floyd said, all you touch and all you see is all your life will ever be. There is nothing new under the sun, because by definition, your brain is only filled with things you experience. So I think truly great artists put shit together in a way that seems new, but it's not new. Nothing is. Everything's built on previous things. Yeah.
Because we've all been a little boy or a little girl or a little MB, and we've all gone through the thing that is
of absorbing. Yeah.
And so we kind of are a story, and there's basic, simple things that we all go through, like we die.
What?
So we what? So we all kind of tell each other that. And I think that's Wes Anderson has a stranglehold on what he wants the world to be, for sure.
Yeah.
In any case.
I wanted to note, it bothered me a little bit only because I think one of the more impactful moments in U.S. history is Chief Joseph of the Nez Perce tribe. They when we were sweeping westward with Manifest Destiny and demolishing Native American culture. Chief Joseph tried to lead his tribe 1,100 miles to escape to Canada, and the U.S. Army chased them. Just let them go, man. Just let them go. But they got within 40 miles of the border, but then they were surrounded, and Chief Joseph famously said, "On this spot, I will fight no more forever." Rather than fight and see his people killed, he gave up and let himself be absorbed by colonialism. And I just thought it was weird that that's what Sam says before he gets struck by lightning.
That's like
It's like, you don't need to invoke that historical event at that moment. That's all. I was just rubbed me the wrong way.
Yeah, it was just like, that is unearned.
Yeah, unearned is the right word. Yeah.
Yeah. That's fantastic. I don't have much for this sequence. This is Wes Anderson's only live action film to not be rated R until the release of Asteroid
Or to
City.
have Owen Wilson involved. So now we know Owen Wilson pushes for the R rating. He's a dirty dog.
He's a dirty dog. It also doesn't end with a slow motion shot over music, which is a trademark of Wes Anderson's.
It does have all the scouts coming out of the tent in slow motion, and like Reservoir Dogs style, but it doesn't have a ramp to slow.
It doesn't ramp it up. It doesn't do the same thing that it typically does. But that's like, directors' trademarks are stupid. You know, you do them whenever you feel right.
Do them or don't. Yeah.
Serve the story. Don't
business.
Don't be M. Night Shyamalan where you're like, I got to be in this.
Right. Another thing that doesn't matter. Well, he can always go, well, Hitchcock did it, you know? And it's like, yeah.
It's another thing that doesn't matter. And why did he do it? Because he was making so many movies, dude, that he was just like, fuck it.
Yeah.
And it was also a different thing. It was a student
Peter Jackson is in Lord of the Rings as like a crusty villager.
Like, especially when you're building these scaffoldings that create these huge movies where they're huge sound stages and you have ultimate control over everything.
It's fun
Why
for
not
you.
do shit
Knock
like
yourself
that? That's
out.
fun.
Yeah.
But it has nothing to do with the telling of the story.
Sure. No, of course not. Last factoid I got, and it doesn't matter either. This is just an affectation, but because we love structure in this house, I like when midpoints have some kind of Easter egg in them. And this one does. And this movie is made structurally as two separate halves. There's almost a 3-act structure to them falling in love and then it ending with them getting caught. And then there's and like making out at the beach. And then there's a little 3-act structure to the second half with the storm rolling in and everything working out with the adoption. These are like evenly split. So the movie is exactly 46 minutes and 59 seconds is the halfway point.
Holy shit.
And you can track the first half and the second half as if there were title cards that said part 1 and part 2. There aren't, but it is structured that way. And there's a little Easter egg to indicate that, which is at that exact moment in the movie, she's reading aloud to Sam from one of her fantasy books, and she turns the page and says part 2, and then it cuts out. That is cute. The midpoint of the film, which I'm like, yeah, that's something.
And then they wake up, right? And then
then they wake up and they've been caught. Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's great.
Yeah.
That's a good show.
It's another thing that doesn't matter, but for some reason I like that, and I don't like the director putting himself in.
Yeah, I like the
it's all taste.
I like I like the symmetry of structure, you know, as we talk about. It's like poetry. It rhymes.
It rhymes. But poems don't have to rhyme. They can just be creative.
Yeah, man, you can just jazz it up, baby.
Yeah, as we do as professional jazzers of mouth sounds about topics. And we've done that, I think. Thank you all for listening.
It's not about the notes that you play. It's about the notes that I play.
Yeah, see, I have a bold new stance. It is about the notes you play. Because I like rock and roll, baby.
That's a cool note.
That's a cool note. That's
on
a
that
good
note.
Wah. Mm-hmm. Oh, nice. On that note. I like it.
Let's get out of here, right?
Okay. Next time, do we know what we'll be covering when we switch back to PT? Is it Phantom Thread time already?
So after Moonrise Kingdom 2012, we got 2014 Inherent Vice.
Inherent Vice. I've never seen that. People keep comparing it in positive terms with Big Lebowski to me. So I'm very excited. I think that'll be fun.
Well, we'll see
We'll see you
how
next
that
time.
resolves in Swaim's mind in a month.
See you then.
This has been a Small Beans endeavor. We're a bunch of pals who make podcasts, sketches, music, web series, and movies. The Beans always have new ideas percolating, so make sure to check us out at patreon.com/smallbeans. That's patreon.com/smallbeans, where you can browse all of our current and past content, see what we've got planned in the future, and learn how your support can help the small beans grow into huge, giant monster beans. If you enjoyed this content module, please like, rate, subscribe, or tell a friend about us. We love you.